Hi and welcome to the live session. I'm Swetha and I'll be taking you through this critical reasoning session that we're doing. We're going to be looking at weekend and argument questions. We'll look at how you have to approach the questions, and we will look at a few practice questions to look at the different kind of answer options that the GMAT can present and what are the typical traps that you have to avoid when we're doing these questions. Okay. Let's get started. We'll look at the first question. One minute. All right. I'm going to give you a sample critical reasoning argument. We're going to be looking at it and using it as an example to discuss the theory and about your approach to weekend questions. Let's take this argument. After the Sunshine University introduced an online course for some of its arts programs, it saw a decline in the number of candidates applying for the corresponding classroom program. There has also been a dip in the percentage of students from these classroom programs who are getting job offers from companies who have traditionally been recruiting from the campus. One of the recruiters mentioned that they felt that the candidates were not as proficient as before, dissuading them from making the usual number of offers. This clearly shows that the candidates who opted for the online program instead of the classroom program were the cream of the crop, and that the university must discontinue the online program to increase the quality of these classroom programs and to maintain its reputation. Now, when you look at each argument, there are two very evident parts to an argument. You have the conclusion to the argument and you have the premises in the argument. The conclusion is the one statement in the argument where the author has essentially expressed his opinion. What is the author's opinion here? That would be the conclusion. The premises are the supporting information that has been used in order to arrive at that conclusion. So whatever facts he has given to arrive at his or to justify his opinion would be called the premises. Now, whenever you read an argument, take the time to identify the conclusion in the argument. So weekend questions are essentially asking you to weaken the conclusion, point out that the conclusion in the argument need not necessarily be valid. If you don't understand what the conclusion in the argument is, then it's very likely that you might end up with the wrong answer on these question types. So once you finish reading an argument, ensure that you take a minute and tell yourself, this is the opinion that the author is expressing. So in the Sunshine University argument, he's saying that the candidates who opted for the online program were the cream of the crop, and that the university must discontinue the online program to increase the quality and maintain its reputation. This will be the conclusion in this particular argument. Now, in this particular argument, when beginning the conclusion, he says this clearly shows that, and then he's presenting the conclusion. Words such as clearly shows that, therefore, thus, need not always be present in every single argument that you are looking at. In some arguments, you might have to figure out on your own what the conclusion is. It is also not necessary that the last sentence in the argument would be the conclusion. For all you know, the argument could have started off by presenting the conclusion in the very first sentence and then presented his logic or reasoning behind it. All of the remaining information given in this argument would be the premises. Basically, the facts that are used to show the fact that the university started an online program, fact that there has been a decline in the number of candidates applying for the corresponding classroom program, that there has been a decline in the percentage of students who are getting recruitments and job offers, that the opinion of one of the recruiters that he thought the candidates were not as proficient. All of these are the facts, the premises that are being used in the argument in order to lead to this conclusion in the argument. Having identified the conclusion in the argument, the next step, the next thing that you have to think about is the author's reasoning. How has he reasoned and processed and arrived at this conclusion? Basically, the assumptions that the author has made in order to justify the conclusion. Now, if you had to ask yourself, what is the assumption made by the author? What else is he thinking in his head to arrive at this conclusion? If you try to do it in a very free-flowing fashion, you may be able to identify the assumptions in some of the arguments. You may not be able to identify it in some of the arguments, especially if our personal opinions match what the author is trying to present in the argument, we will think that the argument is extremely convincing and that there are no assumptions or there could possibly be no flaw in the argument at all. But if our personal opinion is contrary to what the author is saying, even an argument that sounds super convincing, we will not see it as convincing. We will think there has to be some assumptions that the author is making. We will find flaws that are not there in the argument at all. So you cannot make this attempt to identify the author's reasoning a subjective process, because you cannot let it be determined by the topic of discussion or our personal opinions on that particular topic. Therefore, have a methodology, have certain things to look out for when you're working on these question types. Any assumption, any reasoning style that the author is using in the argument will be only one or more of these three different reasoning styles. An argument could be based on a cause-effect relationship. For example, in this argument, we are saying, because there is an increase in the online program, because the online program was introduced, it has led to a decrease in the application for the offline programs, for the classroom programs. That is a cause-effect relationship. That the online program is the cause and the decrease in application is the effect. Further, we are saying because there is a decrease in application for the offline programs, there is a decrease in the proficiency of the students who are attending these offline programs, who are attending these classroom programs. And we are saying because there is a decrease in proficiency, that is leading to a decrease in both the recruitment for the students, their job offers are coming down, and ultimately that is leading to a decrease in the reputation of the university. All of these are the cause-effect relationships that are being used by the author. So using the fact that there is an increase in online applications is arriving at the conclusion that the reputation of the university is coming down using this series of cause-effect relationships. In this particular argument, there is more than one cause-effect relationship. That need not always be the case. An argument need not have a cause-effect relationship to begin with, and it's not necessary that it would be a series like this one. It could just be one cause-effect relationship that is serving as the basis for the conclusion. A second type of reasoning style that you can have is a comparison made in the argument. This particular argument also has a comparison relationships. What is a comparison relationship in this argument? We are comparing the online students and the offline students. So we're basically saying that the quality of the cream of the crop is the online students, is what the argument says. So the quality of the online students must be greater than the quality of the offline students, that all the good quality students are going for the online program and not for the classroom program. We are comparing the quality of the students in the online and the classroom levels. Right? So the students' quality is being compared in the argument. The third type of reasoning style that you can have in the argument, this is a very common style and it's often overlooked by the students, whether the test taker when they're reading an argument. And that is a generalization in the argument. Basically, a generalization happens when there is some kind of a scope shift in the argument. If my premises are talking about one thing, but my conclusion is talking about something broader, then I have a generalization in the argument. For example, when you have a study or when you have a survey, what happens when you have a study or a survey in any argument? A study or a survey is always based on a sample population. It is not, you wouldn't have done, if I said I took a survey in a particular city, I wouldn't have surveyed every single individual in the city. I would have talked to a few hundred people maybe in the city. And then if the survey results are showing something, the conclusion would probably recommend that the city has to go ahead and implement that. So the assumption in the argument is therefore that what is true for the sample who was surveyed must be true for everybody in the city. That is why I'm making that recommendation. So a lot of times these scope shifts will happen. The most evident of it when there is a study or a survey, and people reading the argument don't realize these scope shifts. For example, in this particular argument, it has been given that one of the recruiters felt that the quality of the education, the proficiency of the candidates was coming down. Now that is given as the opinion of one recruiter. Maybe it is just that one recruiter who thinks that. Maybe the proficiency hasn't actually come down. But the author isn't considering that. He is taking into consideration that if this recruiter felt that the proficiency is coming down, then that must be what all people are thinking, and that is why the job offers are coming down. Maybe everybody is saying that there is a proficiency decrease in the university, and that's why they aren't recruiting the candidates, and that's why the number of job offers have come down. So what is the opinion of this one recruiter is representative of all the opinions of all the recruiters who are coming to the university. Is another reasoning logic that the author is using, and that is why he is recommending that the reputation of the university is getting affected, and that to maintain it we have to increase the quality of our classroom programs again by getting rid of the online program, because he believes that that is the general perception among the people. Something else that could have been generalizations in the argument. The argument very specifically talks about online arts programs. Now be very careful and read till the conclusion and check that even till the conclusion we are only talking about the arts programs. If he had said our arts programs quality is suffering, therefore all our programs we have to get rid of them, then all our online programs, then he is generalizing again from arts to all kinds of programs. But in this particular argument, he doesn't do that. Even in the conclusion, he says these corresponding programs is the wording used, which means till the conclusion, he is sticking to a discussion on only arts programs. So that's not a generalization. Another generalization that could have existed is he's talking about Sunshine University. If in the conclusion he said all universities must get rid of their online programs, then that becomes a generalization again. So these are very subtle scope shifts that will occur between your premises and your conclusion. A lot of people tend to miss out on these when they occur in an argument. Please ensure that you identify those. This particular argument we've taken as an example because it has all kinds of these relationships. It had a cause-effect relationship, it had comparison relationship, and it had generalization relationships. Every argument will not have all of these. Out of these 4 or 5 different relationships that we have jotted down here, an argument that you're working on would probably have 2 or 3 of these. So take the time to read the argument, to process it, and to identify what are the relationships that are existing in that particular argument. So when you're working on a weekend question, how should you approach it? What are the steps that you have to take to do it? First, identify first know what would weaken the argument. What do I look for in my answer option? I'm looking for something that would question my conclusion. I need to point out that the conclusion need not be valid. So I need an answer option that points out that we need not get rid of the online programs. That's what I need to point out. Or getting rid of the online programs will not improve my reputation. That's not what is affecting my reputation. It will not necessarily improve my reputation. Just that is not going to be enough, is what I ultimately want my answer option to imply here. In order to achieve that, an answer option will not explicitly say Sunshine University's reputation is not based on whether it has online programs or not. That's making your life too easy. Such an explicit statement that directly questions the conclusion in the argument, the GMAT's not going to give. So what would the answer option do? It would question these reasoning styles that we have identified in order to ultimately question the conclusion. So one of the reasoning styles, the cause-effect relationship that we identified, was that the job offers were coming down because of a decrease in proficiency of the candidates. So if I establish that the job offers are coming down, not because of the online program or the offline program's quality, not because of the proficiency, but because of some other factor, maybe the market itself is doing bad, and throughout the world, for all universities, art program recruitment has come down, then I would be weakening the argument. So I'm questioning the conclusion that the university need not get rid of the online programs by questioning the cause effect or the generalization or the comparison assumptions in the argument. So I can also point out this is just what one recruiter thought. All the recruiters do not necessarily believe that the proficiency of the students at Sunshine University has come down. And by questioning the generalization assumption, you're questioning the conclusion. If I say online quality, they're not necessarily the cream of the crop, then I'm pointing out that the university need not get rid of the online programs. So you question the conclusion, that is your ultimate objective, but your answer option will not very explicitly do that most often than not. So in order to question the conclusion, you have to question the reasoning, and that is why you have to take the time to identify what those reasoning links are in the argument, so that you have a better idea of what you want your answer options to say. So to sum that all up, your steps in answering your weekend questions: first, identify the conclusion in the argument. Tell yourself this is the point that the author is trying to make. Identify how he has arrived at the conclusion. It makes sense to take notes, jot them down like we just did with the Sunshine University argument, because when you jot it down, you are focusing on the core essence of the argument. You're telling yourself what the important relationships are, and you're telling yourself what to watch out for in your answer options. Finally, paraphrase your answer. To paraphrase the answer is to think about the argument, what you want your answer option to say before you go into the answer options. See, with years of practice that the GMAT has had in framing critical reasoning questions, if it has become super efficient, super good at one thing, among many other things, and that is to frame very attractive sounding but incorrect answer options. So if you're not thinking about the argument, and if you're going directly into the answer options, then a lot of times you will pick the attractive sounding answer option, or you'll pick an answer option where your reasoning was influenced by your personal opinions rather than by looking at the logic that is used in the argument itself. So think about what you want your answer option to say. So I want to weaken my argument. I want to say Sunshine University need not get rid of its online program, or that getting rid of it is not going to increase its reputation. And I need to do that by either pointing out that there is no quality difference between the online and the offline programs, that what the one recruiter thought is not necessarily what all recruiters thought, that there is necessarily no decrease in proficiency of the offline students just because their applications have come down, or the job offers they are not getting is because of some other factor, has nothing to do with the online program itself. All those links that we identified, establish that the links need not necessarily hold true. That's your paraphrasing. This is what I want my option to say. Once you think about that, once you do that, go to your answer options and do the process of elimination. See which of the answer options match what you are looking for in the answers. It might sound like a very long process right now to spend so much time on the argument, to take notes and to paraphrase and to identify all the possible links that could go wrong. But with practice, CR is very structured in the sense that there are only a certain number of different reasoning styles that are used in an argument. You can read another 300 critical reasoning argument. You will not find another argument that has some other reasoning style other than having cause-effect comparison or generalization relationships. But the topic of discussion can be about absolutely anything. I can talk about universities, I can talk about global warming, I can talk about politics, I can talk about literature, I can talk about absolutely any topic. There will be some topics where we are comfortable, some topics where the answer options will be attractive. So eventually, your accuracy and your speed of answering will go up only if you're thinking about the reasoning style, because then you're focusing on the framework of the argument rather than looking at the fluff that is surrounding it. Don't look at the fluff, focus on the framework. Ensure that you are thinking about the argument. It might take you 2.5 to 3 minutes for the first weekend question that you're doing, but because there are only set patterns, the minute you read the argument itself, with practice, you will go, okay, so this is a generalization here, there's a cause effect here, this is a comparison, and in 1 minute, you will be able to process the argument. Your accuracy will touch 90% and stay there only if you are thinking about the argument and paraphrasing the answer. That is probably the most important thing that you can do to ensure you get your answers right. Okay, so think about and process the argument. Do not rush into your answer options. Then you will not know why you're making the mistakes that you're making, and your accuracy will keep fluctuating all over the place. You will have one set of questions with a 95% accuracy, the very next set of questions with a 20% accuracy, and no clue why that is happening. Yeah. Now, couple of other things that you have to keep in mind, what you should not be doing when you're doing weekend questions. Typical traps, basically, typical types of incorrect answer options. An answer option would not weaken the argument if it does not bring in new information. See, a lot of people look at the argument and say, okay, why are we talking about other factors that are affecting arts recruitment? That's new information. So if it's new information, how does it relate to the argument? And then people eliminate that answer option. But think about it. What has already been given in the argument has been given by the author in order to lead to his conclusion, in order to support his conclusion. So if I stick to only the information that is given in the argument, how will I be able to weaken it? An answer option has to bring in new information that is not already there in the argument. So only when I bring in new information can I point out to the author, look, you've missed this, and therefore you would be able to weaken the argument. So don't look for an answer option that repeats what's already there. Don't eliminate answer options simply because they are bringing in new information. This is another common mistake that people make. Do not pick an answer option that questions the premises. The premises are facts used in the argument. All right, solid facts, like saying the sun rises in the east and water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. You're not going to go and question that. You're not going to ask, how can you say the number that comes after 4 is 5? The integer that comes after 4 is 5 or something like that, right? These are accepted facts. Similarly, the premises given in this argument is an accepted fact. Do not question it. Don't pick an answer option that says something like, no, the job offers have not actually been coming down. That's not weakening the argument. Or Sunshine University doesn't actually have an arts program doesn't actually have an online course for the arts programs. Doesn't necessarily weaken the argument. So if you're directly contradicting the premises, you're still not questioning the conclusion. The conclusion and the logic is what you need to focus on. Don't question the premises in the argument, no matter how attractive the answer option sounds. Finally, don't change the perspective in the argument. In this discussion, we are talking only about arts programs and we are talking only about Sunshine University. We have not broadened it to and extended the discussion to include other universities or talk about other programs at Sunshine. So if you have an answer option that talks about the science department at Sunshine, that would not be the right answer. If you have an answer option that talks about other universities, still not be the right answer. So you have to bring in new information, but you have to say within the scope of the discussion. Within the discussion on Sunshine University's art programs, what else can I say to weaken the argument? Exchanging the perspective completely will not necessarily weaken it. That will be out of scope of the discussion. So let's revisit the argument, right? And let's look at which of the answer options would weaken the argument. I'll give you a set of answer options that we can look at, right? Quick minute to read the argument again and to remember it, and then we will look at the answer options. See, after the university introduced an online course for some of their arts programs, saw a decline in the number of candidates applying for the corresponding classroom program. There's been a dip in the percentage of the students from these classroom programs who are getting job offers, who have traditionally been recruiting from the campus. One of the recruiters mentioned that they felt that the candidates were not as proficient as before, dissuading them from making the usual number of offers. This shows that the candidates who opted for the online program were the cream of the crop, and that the university must discontinue the online program to increase the quality of these classroom programs and to maintain its reputation. All the cause effect and the comparison relationships that we jotted down earlier when we analyzed the argument, given it on the screen. Decrease in online admissions leading to a decrease in application, leading to a decrease in proficiency. And then decrease in proficiency is leading to a decrease in recruitment. That is also affecting the reputation of the university. This opinion given by one recruiter is true for all recruiters. And there's a difference in quality between the students in the online and the classroom programs. Online classroom quality is better. These are the relationships. Give you a set of answer options. Let's see if these answer options are weakening this conclusion. Any of these relationships, even one of them, if it weakens, it would still be a valid answer option. Let's see. The online program does not come with any guarantee of recruitment, and the students who took up the program are well aware of this fact. So the online program doesn't guarantee recruitment. So we're saying recruitment doesn't happen for the online program. But we're not talking about recruitment for the online program. The recruitment that we're discussing in the argument is only about recruitment for the classroom programs. That has not been discussed in this answer option. It doesn't tell me what's happening to classroom program recruitment, and that is why this will not necessarily weaken the argument. It also doesn't touch on the issues of the maintenance of the reputation of the university and so on, right? So that is why this answer option will not make sense. Second one, university has always had stringent admission criteria for the classroom arts programs, and the candidates gaining admission do so only if they satisfy the same. Now, one of the reasons that we are saying that the proficiency has come down is basically because the number of applications for the classroom program has been coming down. But if no matter how many people have applied for the program, if the university has always had stringent admission criteria and has always ensured that the candidates are satisfying that stringent criteria, will there necessarily be a change in the quality of your classroom students? The classroom students who are coming in today, after these online programs have started, are very likely to have met or to be of the same level as the ones who were taken in by the university a few years ago. So we'll hold on to this answer option because it seems to be implying that the quality of your online students is remaining the same. Sorry, of your offline students is remaining the same. So we'll hold on to it, check the other answer options, and then come back to it. Some of the other recruiters claim that they were also not recruiting because they were not satisfied with the candidates. Now, one of the assumptions made in the argument is that the opinion of one recruiter is true for all recruiters. Now, C is saying, yes, all recruiters, other recruiters are also thinking that the proficiency of the candidate is coming down. So what is C doing? It is validating this. It is increasing the likelihood that, yes, people aren't recruiting. It's not just that one fellow because of the proficiency. So what C ends up doing is it ends up supporting the argument. What you want the answer option to do is to weaken it. So C is also not going to be our answer. We can eliminate it. A test was conducted for all classroom students, and the results showed that the performance of the students this year was comparable to the performance of the students last year. Okay, so again, it says that the results were comparable, which basically means that last year versus this year, quality is the same. So we'll hold on to it because it seems to imply that the quality hasn't come down. We'll check the next answer option. He says, a newly established university in the state recruited most of the reputed professors from many of the departments at Sunshine University by offering better tenure terms. And I'm basically saying that the good professors, the reputed professors, are no longer working at the university. That could explain why the quality of the education has come down. So it need not necessarily be because of the online program. It could be because there are a number of professors who have left the university and are no longer teaching there. But if you look at the answer option carefully, it says that these reputed professors were recruited from many of the departments at Sunshine University. Was the arts department affected? Were these professors taken from the arts departments? We do not know, because remember, the argument is very specifically talking only about the arts programs that are offered at Sunshine University. So if all these professors who are recruited were from other universities, other departments of the university, then that still does not weaken my argument. So if it had said all the departments or specifically said arts department, then maybe E would have worked in weakening the argument. Right now, because we don't know how it's affecting the arts department, I'm eliminating E. That leaves us with B and D again. And both these answer options seem to be implying that the quality of the students has not necessarily changed. B is saying quality has been the same always. And D is comparing last versus this year. Go back and take a quick look at the argument. Is it in the last year that the online program was introduced? When did Sunshine University actually introduce the online program? It only says that they recently introduced it, not necessarily last year. So what if it has been over 2 years since the online program was introduced. And last year performance was also bad. The performance was not any better, but what if in both years their performance was bad? We do not know. And then it talks about all classroom students. So specifically art students, we do not know. We're not really bothered about all the other departments at the university. Right, so D is not very clear, as clear as B, in saying that CB specifically talks about classroom arts programs. It says they've always had stringent criteria. So no matter when the online program was introduced, B establishes that the offline quality hasn't necessarily come down, whereas D doesn't necessarily do that. If the argument had clearly stated that it was in the last year that the online program was introduced, then perhaps D would make better sense than it does right now. But even then, Bravo is very clear, B is very clear in what it is saying, and that would be the right answer here. So do this process of elimination by comparing with your reasoning in the argument rather than directly comparing with the argument itself, right? Another thing that you have to keep in mind, other things that you have to keep in mind when you're working on your answer options. Don't make any assumptions to justify your answer options. Real world knowledge and assumptions should not be brought in when you're looking at an answer option. So you read an answer option and don't interpret it based on real life knowledge. Only look at how it impacts the argument, and don't look at how it is impacting our real life understanding, our real life information. Another thing that you will have to remember when you're doing weekend questions, this is very important. Do not expect an answer option to completely trash the argument and to say that the argument will most definitely not hold true. That's not necessarily what you will find your answer option doing. See, a lot of times, there is a concept called reasonable doubt, right? When you have when there is a jury is passing judgment on a case, they will say that you can convict the criminal only if you can prove beyond all reasonable doubt that he committed a particular crime. There has to be zero doubt whatsoever that he committed the crime. Even if there is a small room for doubt, even there is a small possibility that he did not commit the crime, then you're not supposed to convict him. An extension of that, I'm just using that as an analogy to make my point. When you're weakening the argument, all that you're doing is you're raising reasonable doubt about the viability of the conclusion. That's all that you have to do. You don't have to completely trash the argument and prove that this conclusion has to be false. You don't have to prove the criminal innocent. You only have to say, maybe he is not guilty, and then he goes free, right? That is what you're doing when you're weakening the argument. You don't have to prove this conclusion has to be wrong. There is no way that getting rid of the online program will improve the reputation of the university. There's no tie whatsoever between the reputation and the online program. That's not what you have to say. Maybe this is not what we have to do. Maybe doing this will not necessarily increase the reputation of the university. As long as you raise that iota of doubt, the answer option is still weakening it. So one of the common mistakes that people make when they're doing weekend questions, they expect the answer option to completely disprove the conclusion, to completely trash the conclusion, and therefore they end up eliminating these answer options that are more subtle in achieving their objective. Again, to completely disprove the conclusion, to say the conclusion has to be false, will be to make your life too easy, right? Will be to make the answer option too evident. The GMAT is not going to do that. We're going to bring in an answer option that implies that one of the relationships that exists in the argument need not necessarily be true. By implying that one of the relationships that exists in the argument need not necessarily be true, the answer option gets weakened. The argument gets weakened because you cannot no longer rely on the logic, the justification used by the author, right? So focus on the logic, focus on the reasoning, think about it before you go to the argument. Do not go directly into the answer options. Do not let your external knowledge influence your answering. Do not question the premises used in the argument, and don't expect the answer option to be very evident in what it is trying to do. You will not have an option that directly says the conclusion is wrong. It will only imply that perhaps the conclusion is wrong. That is what you want the right answer to do, right? So keep all of these in mind when you're working on a weekend question. Now let's go back. Let's look at a few more examples of weekend questions, and then we will discuss each of those arguments. Let me just share the file with you. This is the first of the questions that we're going to be working on. Take a minute to read the question, and then we will discuss it. Even though the screen shows you the answer options, don't go jump directly into the answer options. Think about the argument before you go to the options. Let's look at the argument separately, this particular one. Let's reason it out, and then we will look at the answer options. So we're saying that the menu at the cafeteria of the King High School has always been monitored and designed by a special committee comprising parents and teachers. So at King High School, it's the parents who are designing the menu. However, the one at the Leader High School, another school, is voted on by the students themselves. So here the students are determining the menu at the cafeteria. So recent evaluation of the two menus showed surprising results. The menu at Leader, the one that was chosen by the students, was found to be more healthy and wholesome than the one at King. So clearly, students are more conscious of their health and nutritional requirements than are their parents and teachers. This is the conclusion in the argument where you're saying that the students are more conscious of their health and nutritional requirements. So what are we looking at here? We are comparing the menu at King High School and Leader High School, and we are saying that at Leader, the menu was better, right? So Leader's menu is better than King. Because Leader's menu is better than King's menu, what are we concluding? That must imply that the students are more conscious than parents of their health requirements. Students are more conscious of health is our implication, right? So if the menu is better, that must mean that the consciousness is also better, right? So better menu would mean better consciousness. That is the cause-effect relationship, better health consciousness. That's the cause-effect relationship in the argument. Another thing to notice, we're very specifically comparing the menu at King High School and Leader High School. But look at the conclusion. It says, students are more conscious of their health and nutritional requirements than parents and teachers. It doesn't tell me which students that we're talking about, which means we're talking about students in general, which means there is a generalization assumption in the argument as well. We are saying that if this is what is true in King and Leader, if in these two schools put together, the students seem to be more conscious of their health requirements, then that must imply that for all students and parents and teachers, this is true. Everywhere in general, students are better than parents and teachers. About health consciousness specifically, right? That is what we're talking about. So we're talking specifically about their nutritional requirements and health requirements, health consciousness. If you have an answer option that talks about something other than nutrition and health, if you talk about how parents and teachers have a better idea of what the students need to do in their future than the students themselves, then you're not necessarily weakening the argument because we're only talking about the health consciousness. But if you question any of these two relationships in the argument, either the cause-effect relationship or the comparison. So basically, if you have an answer option that says So what if the menu at leader is better? That doesn't necessarily mean the students have better health consciousness. The menu at leader could be better because of other factors. Then you're weakening the argument. If you point out, just because in leader the students are better than the parents at King, doesn't necessarily mean that everywhere in general students are better than their parents and teachers in knowing about their health and nutritional requirements, then you are weakening the argument. So either of these two relationships is what you have to question in order to question the argument. Let's look at the answer options and see what the answer options are doing. While designing the menu, the committee at King considered suggestions from the students. Okay, so who could design the menu at King? It was the parents and the teachers. But you're saying that the parents and the teachers didn't do it all on their own. They took inputs from the students as well. So which could possibly imply that the quality of the menu at King was because of the suggestions given by the students and not necessarily because of the parents. So I will not eliminate A, I will hold on to it, because our very fundamental foundation of this particular argument was that King's menu was not as health conscious as leader's menu, which means if the parents were not necessarily responsible for the menu at King's, maybe that's the reason. Maybe the students are not more health conscious than the parents are. So we'll hold on to A. The menu of the Riverfront High School. Now we're talking about an entirely different high school. So some people might eliminate this at first glance, not read the answer option at all. But the argument does generalize based on these two schools. The conclusion is not specific to the schools, so keep it in play. Consider the answer option. It says, the menu at the Riverfront High School has also been designed by the students themselves. Okay, so at Riverfront, the students designed the menu, and how good was it? What do we know about the quality of the menu at Riverfront? We do not have that information, and that is why B does not weaken the argument. If B said that the menu at Riverfront was designed by the students, but it was not as healthy as the menu at Lida, then yes, B can be used to weaken the argument. But it doesn't talk about how healthy a menu we are looking at Riverfront, right? So that's why B will not work. A study recently conducted among teenagers shows increasing number of teens suffering from anorexia in an effort to stay thin. So a lot of teenagers are suffering from anorexia because they want to stay thin. How does that affect the menu quality? How does that mean that the students are more or less health conscious, are aware of their nutritional requirements or not? Because an increasing number of teens who are suffering from anorexia could still mean that teens are still better than their parents. This doesn't tell me why. What if the parents are indirectly influencing these teens to stay thin and to forget about eating healthy? What is making them do this, right? Maybe they are aware of what's healthy, but they still want to reject it because they want to stay super thin. All that we are talking about in the argument is not about whether they have healthy lifestyles and practices, but about whether they are health conscious. Maybe the teens are health conscious and still suffering from anorexia. We don't know for sure. Consciousness has not really been discussed in this particular answer option, and that's why C is out. The students at LIDA had to vote for the items on the menu from a fixed list of options prepared by their teachers. The teachers have actually given the options that the students at LIDA voted for, which means the teachers had a role to play in the menu at LIDA. Kind of like A. A says the students also had a role to play at King, and D says it was not just purely students, it was also the teachers. So the intention behind A and D seems to be the same thing, to imply that it was not just parents or not just the students designing the menu at the two places, right? So I'm holding on to D as well. We'll consider this option as well. E says the menu at LIDA changes every month, while the one at King only changes every 3 months. It's definitely irrelevant. How often the menu changes is of no consequence, does not determine how health conscious anybody is or about the quality of the menu. So that's completely unrelated to the entire discussion. We don't even have to consider it. Look at A and D again. Now if you look at A, it says The committee at King considered suggestions from the students. They considered suggestions from the students. Did they act on those suggestions? Did they actually include those suggestions in the menu? We do not know for sure. So the final call at King could have still been taken by the parents and teachers. Maybe the suggestions given by the students were completely ignored by the parents, right? So the responsibility for the menu at King still lies with the parents and teachers. But in D, if the students at leader are voting from a fixed list of options prepared by their teachers, where does the opinion of the students come into picture? If all the choices given by the teachers were healthy ones and the students had to choose from it, the health consciousness of the students is not being depicted by the menu. It's actually options that were actually given by the teacher. So D would be a better option than A, because in A, the responsibility for deciding the menu is still completely in the hands of the parents and teachers, whereas in D, the responsibility for designing the menu is now split between the students and the teachers. The options given by the teachers have a larger role to play in D than the suggestions given by students as mentioned in A. Because here it's a fixed list and they are forced to choose from that. So between these two, D weakens the argument better, because if D is true, the quality of the menu and leader is not entirely dependent on the students. So it doesn't necessarily mean the students are more health conscious than their parents and teachers. And D therefore weakens the argument. So get the next question. Give you a minute to read it and then we will discuss it. Let's look at the argument and then compare it, reason it out, and then discuss with the answer options. It has long been established that teenagers who binge drink are more likely to have alcohol problems in adulthood as well. It was believed that the problems were primarily behavioral or societal, that these teenagers never learned to cope with stress. So the original belief was that because they are binge drinking, right? Then the ones who binge drink are likely to have increased alcohol problems as an adult as well, right? And we're saying that that is because of it's basically caused by stress. Stress is leading to increased alcohol consumption. This was the original belief. That's alcohol. Right. However, a study shows that binge drinking as adolescents can lead to gene regulation and disrupt brain development. So if I binge drink, that is going to lead to a decrease in my brain development in a manner that promotes anxiety, and that is going to lead to an increase in anxiety. So he is basically saying it would seem that people, it says people now, whereas so far it said adolescents, people do not turn to alcohol to relieve anxiety. So it's not, but rather that turning to alcohol induces anxiety. So he's saying it's not stress that is causing alcohol, it is alcohol consumption that is leading to anxiety. It's not the other way around. Right? Turning to alcohol induces anxiety. It's not anxiety that is leading to alcohol. And also we've talked about adolescents so far, and then suddenly in the conclusion it says people. So what is true for adolescents who drink is true for all people who drink. People who drink as start drinking as adolescents versus all people who drink. That's another assumption in the argument. Right. Now, this is a little complicated argument, because not just are we saying that something is true, that alcohol consumption leads to increase in anxiety, we're also saying something is not true, that increase in anxiety doesn't necessarily lead to increase in alcohol consumption. So when you have this negation that is happening in the argument, to weaken it, you can disprove either one of these two, right? You can say the original belief is actually true, that it's anxiety that is making them drink alcohol and not the other way around. Or you can say alcohol doesn't necessarily contribute to anxiety. That does not necessarily happen. You can either disprove this link, you can disprove this, or you can support this. Either one of these two you can do, because the author is negating this, you can do it the other way around. It's also generalized. What's true for teens is true for all people. So you can also question that and say, maybe for adolescents, it's alcohol contributing to anxiety, but not necessarily for everybody. So let's look at the answer options and see what the options are saying. Gene regulation is a more difficult root cause to control or change than either behavioral or societal causes. Now, this gene regulation is more difficult to control than either behavioral or societal causes. So, for one thing, it's talking about controlling or changing it, right? We've not talked about whether you need to control or change it. We've only talked about what leads to alcohol consumption. And whether any of these causes, how do they contribute to alcohol consumption, has not been discussed in the argument at all. The net result, are we drinking because it's of anxiety, or are we anxious because we're drinking? That was not discussed, touched on in this option. So that's out. B says, anxiety is usually not the reason for alcohol abuse. Okay, seems to be good so far. The author is saying anxiety is the reason for alcohol. The author is saying anxiety is not the reason for alcohol abuse, but rather an excuse. Now look at the argument. He's saying anxiety is not the reason for alcohol abuse. So here also you're saying anxiety is not the reason, which means kind of this is supporting the author and not weakening it, right? B, you can eliminate. C says, respondents to another study claim that they had an alcoholic drink at the end of their workday only on days that proved to be especially stressful. So there are some people who are saying that they have alcoholic drink only when they are feeling stressed. So what is he saying? Stress is contributing to them drinking alcohol. And that is the opposite of what the author is saying, right? He's saying anxiety is not causing alcohol consumption. C is saying anxiety is causing alcohol consumption. We'll hold on to C, quickly check the other answer options. Brain development is not affected for people who take up binge drinking only after reaching adulthood. Okay, so brain development is not affected, but does that mean they don't become anxious? Why do they drink? We do not know. Anxiety's link again is not discussed. Sure, brain development and gene regulation are discussed in the argument. Mentioning them is fine as long as you're linking them to anxiety or alcohol consumption. And that is what both A and D are not doing. They are talking about brain development, they're talking about gene regulation, but not linking them to either anxiety or alcohol consumption. Finally, E, all adolescents do not claim anxiety as the reason they resort to binge drinking. They don't say anxiety is the reason. Author is also saying anxiety is not the reason, which means this is also kind of supporting the discussion made by the author and is not really weakening it, and that is out as well. People might tend to pick Bravo or Echo as the answer when you don't have an understanding of what the answer or argument is trying to say. Here you need to correctly interpret what is causing what according to the argument. Is it anxiety causing alcohol or alcohol causing anxiety? What is the author saying? And ensure that the answer option questions that particular link. So a lot of times when negations happen in the argument, be careful about your interpretation of the argument. The difficulty lies in your understanding of the argument more so than your answer options. Here, C works. One, because it says stress contributes to alcohol. Second, it talks about another group of people in general, not necessarily people who took up binge drinking as adolescents. And that's perfectly fine because the author is equating what's true for adolescents to what's true for all people. Right? So when you're working on a critical reasoning weekend question, ensure that you do this process, that you think about the argument, that you reason and identify the links that are there in the argument, and that you identify how you have to weaken the argument. Tell yourself what the answer has to be, paraphrase the answer, before you look at the answer options. If you don't do that, you will have no clue what to expect out of the answer options, and anything would seem attractive. In an argument like this one, if you had not jotted down what is causing what, you might very well have picked the wrong answer option, an answer option that supports the argument rather than weakens it, because you're not really sure what you want the answer to do. So take the time to think about and do it. Initially, for the first maybe 15-20 weekend questions that you're working on, don't monitor the time that you take. Even if it takes you extra time, that's still perfectly fine. But as you progress, restrict yourself to 1.5 minutes and try to solve a question within the time that is given to you. Okay? There are additional practice questions that are there on the website, on this link that has been added here on YouTube. So you can check those questions out, practice them, and then let us know if you have any questions. Thank you, guys.